Hello out there. This is Elias Paulson, and welcome to Business 405, Business Law. I'll be your professor for the next 10 weeks in this class. The purpose of this video and the videos that will be uploaded each week is to make you more comfortable reaching out to me and communicating with me and talking about the issues in this class, whether they're concepts, whether it's the application of those concepts, or whether it's technical issues that you may have. Anything related to this class, please feel free to contact me. You have my email, you have my cell phone. If you're going to text me, usually you can text me and just say, hey, I'd like to talk at this certain period of time, or within this, at this time, are you available, or when are you available to speak, to talk. Over text, I found that I can give yes or no answers, but I prefer to communicate through the email, and really ultimately, if it's something very substantial, I'd like to go and discuss it over the phone. So once again, I didn't want to get too in the weeds there, but I want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable in communicating with me, comfortable in understanding these concepts. Because one of the things that, when we talk about the law, a lot of times people equate it to learning a new language. And even when you read this first chapter that we're going to briefly touch on here in this video, you'll see some of the concepts, maybe in Latin, so actually literally in another language, maybe certain terminology that you haven't seen before, certain terminology that may be a little confusing, and that's what I'm here for. I want you guys to know that you can call me, email me, contact me, and understand these concepts. The whole point of this class, you're probably not going to have the same opportunity down the road to go ahead and read this material, have a subject matter expert with regard to law talk to you about it, and really be able to internalize this information. And ultimately, my goal is obviously to make you feel comfortable with this material, but also allow you, when you walk out of this class, to say, hey, you know what? I learned this material, not only the terminology, but I took it to the next step from a critical thinking standpoint, and I understand how to apply this in life. And as business majors, if you are a business major, or even if you're any other kind of major, law affects almost every industry. I should say almost every industry. It affects every industry. And especially from a business standpoint, a lot of what business is from a legal standpoint is to say, you know what, I understand that there are these legal issues that are out there, maybe a contract issue or a property issue, or a business entity issue, or a tort issue, whatever it is. There are possibilities that may affect my business. And I understand what they are, and I have a plan for dealing with them if they occur. Unfortunately, we are in an increasingly litigious society. And as a business owner, more likely than not, you're going to be dealing with multiple legal issues over the course of the life of your business. And the more prepared you are for these issues, the more that you can say, hey, I have a plan, not only affects your ability to be successful in business, but it also affects, from a leadership standpoint, the people that are working for you. And they can, for example, they look at you and say, hey, you know what? We were sued by this other company for breach of contract or whatever it is, but the CEO, the president, understands where we're going, has a plan for where we're going. So you know what? We can compartmentalize that, put it out of our mind, stop worrying about that, and get back to work. Same thing as the leader of a company. I've dealt with it. I understand. I have a plan for it, and I'm going to focus on making money and continuing the profitability of my company. So that's why these issues are so important. It's not to basically sit there and scare you into not starting your own business. That's one thing I do, and I probably should have started out with my background, but I'm a practicing attorney here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I practice the law firm of Paulson & Paulson, and I've been in the practice of law, engaged in the practice of law for almost 20 years. We do a lot of business law, of course, makes sense, right? Commercial transactions, advising small companies, employment issues, things like that. We also do estate planning. We do personal injury. We do real estate law. We do a few other things too, but and all those, believe it or not, are applicable to this business law class, because it's not just about business law. It's almost a smorgasbord of all these different types of law and how it affects your business, or how it could potentially affect your business. So that's what we're doing with this class. We're introducing you and talking to you about some of these concepts, and hopefully, as a business person, you're starting to develop a plan that you can push forward with regard to these issues. And once again, getting back to what I was saying before, the point is not to scare anyone and say, "Oh my gosh, there's all this stuff out there." But the point is to say, I want to avoid or reduce my risk as a business owner. And from a legal standpoint, I understand what issues are out there. I have a plan, and I know what I'm going to do to avoid that risk or at least reduce it going forward. And the more that you can do that, the more money you're going to make, the more profitable you're going to be, because you're not spending as much time on the legal issues. You're spending time being profitable. And hopefully, from a business standpoint, your business is being profitable. So that's what the goal is. From a personal standpoint, I grew up here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Every once in a while, you may hear the New York in me come out. I lived up there for a little while, and I have family up there. So you'll hear that a little bit. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I've been married for over 20 years. I have 2 children. I have a 12-year-old. I have a 14-year-old now and a 9-year-old. And that's pretty much it as far as from a personal standpoint. I mean, I have a little more deep than that, but you guys don't care about that. From a teaching standpoint, I've been teaching for 8 years on the undergraduate and graduate level, mainly business classes, some legal studies classes as well. But one thing that I love teaching online, and that's one of the reasons for these videos, is I love the engagement with the students. And that needs to be my focus. That is my focus with regard to these classes. That's the reason for these videos. So you can look at it and reach out and say, hey, you know what? Paulson's real. It's a real person out there. It's not just some amorphous blob that grades my papers every once in a while and types in some really awesome comments. There is someone out there. I'm a subject matter expert. I'm a professor. I'm not just a facilitator of the class. So I want you guys to reach out to me and talk to me about these issues. That's what I enjoy. That's why I enjoy this class so much. I learn from the experiences of the students as much as you guys learn from me. A couple other things too, just a couple best practices. We talked about the overview of the class, but a couple best practices with regard to my classes. Each week we have a discussion board, and we also have a quiz. And one of the reasons that I've set it out that way is kind of harkens back to what I was saying initially about the law. It's not something that's common sense a lot of times as far as the terminology and how things apply and how and really what things mean. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to compartmentalize each week into the discussion and then also the quiz to go ahead and allow you to internalize that information and go forward. So one of the best practices is please, abide by the deadlines. The people that are the most successful in my classes are the ones that do that. And there's a couple reasons. Obviously, number one is, if you're late, it affects your grade, and you can see that in the Moodle site. But number two, it also affects your learning. From a discussion standpoint, if you post a discussion question 4 weeks late, I will give you credit. There'll be a penalty assessed, but you're not engaged in the discussion. You're just posting it, and no one's really responding to you. That's your opportunity to discuss issues, to really substantially respond to these issues. And please don't write 1 or 2 sentence responses. That's not going to be appropriate, and that's you're shorting yourself as well. If you put in there a substantial response, and then also respond to your classmates substantially, that's the way that you're going to get the most engagement. That's the way you're going to get the most out of this class. That's the way you're going to get the most learning from this class. And that's probably not the most articulate way of saying it, but that's the way you're going to learn the most from this class. So please do that the best you can. And when I ask you a question, please respond to it, because that's my way, once again, of keeping the discussion moving forward. So at the end of each discussion, I'm going to give you my own analysis of the issue as well. So you'll see that also. So just briefly, this week we talked about Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and I don't want to spend 25 minutes on it, but I do want to go ahead and touch on a few very, very important topics. And the first chapter talks about the law. And of course, the law. Well, that's great. It's a lot of information about the law. What does the law do? Well, the law provides us rules from a criminal standpoint and then also from a civil standpoint. And this is at the very, very basic level. Criminal, it's the state saying, hey, you didn't do something in accordance with, or you act in a certain way that's in violation of our criminal code, in our criminal laws. So maybe a breaking and entering, an assault and battery, all the way up to rape, murder, everything else that kind of goes along with that. Those kind of situations, an individual is prosecuted by the state, and really by the city, city Commonwealth Attorney, and it's essentially the state here in Virginia, who is prosecuting these cases against these individuals. And each city has their own Commonwealth Attorney's office. So in those situations, people can be fined. They can be, told not to engage in something. So, for example, if they're fighting with their neighbor, they can say, look, you know what, there's an order in place that you cannot be within a certain number of feet of your neighbor. And they can also imprison people with regard to criminal cases. The other side of the coin are the civil cases. And these are the situations like your breach of contract or your negligence, things like that, your car accidents, the thing you see these people screaming and yelling about at 2 o'clock in the morning. By the way, that is not me. But those are all civil claims. That's where you have a plaintiff and you have a defendant. And typically what you're pursuing some sort of money damage, some sort of compensatory damage. And sometimes if it's fraud or something to that effect, potentially punitive damages. So in that case, you have one individual, one business suing another individual, another business. And so you have a plaintiff and you have a defendant. And so all these laws, where do they come from? And that's really the base and what I want you to focus in on chapter 1. Come from our federal constitution. And of course, we live in Virginia, so we have our own state constitution. Each state has their own constitution as well. We have our federal laws. We have our, come from Congress, come from the United States Senate. We have executive orders, things like that come from the federal side. And then we also have our state laws that affect us individually. And I won't go through the history lesson, but the way that our country was founded, we have 2 different systems of laws. We also have 2 different systems, two different court systems. We have the federal system and we have our state system as well. So, there are a lot of laws out there. And so depending on what state you're in, from a legal standpoint, I'm licensed here in the state of Virginia because that's the bar exam that I passed. And there's a bar exam in each state that you either have to pass or you have to waive into, depending on what that state's laws and rules are with regard to that. And there's a reason for that. Because from a federal standpoint, of course, the federal laws affect everybody. But each state has their own individual laws that are different. The second chapter talks about alternative dispute resolution. And briefly, when you talk about that, and it's not just alternative dispute resolution, but it's also just resolving disputes. When parties have issues, and this is something that's really important from a business standpoint, you want to analyze it and say, what are my options? Okay, if someone hasn't paid me, what do I do? Do I just immediately go and sue them? Do I go and talk to them? Do I have some sort of intermediary that we talked with? Do we negotiate with them in some way through their attorney? Do we mediate? Do we arbitrate? What are our requirements and what are our options that are out there, from a contractual standpoint and also from a legal standpoint, from a law standpoint? So when we talk about alternative dispute resolution, and let's even step back one step, from a legal standpoint, litigation is a way of resolving disputes. So if somebody doesn't pay you under a contract, you can sue them either in state court, federal court, whatever the proper jurisdiction is, in order to enforce that contract and get the money that you're owed ultimately. Now, in doing that, litigation is very, very expensive. And even if you have attorney's fee clauses written into the contract, you're still expending a certain amount of money and hoping or presuming or planning that the other party that you're going to get this judgment against has money to go ahead and pay you so you can pay your attorney's fees or actually be reimbursed for your attorney's fees, because typically attorneys want to be paid when they charge, and also compensate you for your loss. So there are a lot of things, and we're going to talk about it over the course of this class when we talk about contracts, but a lot of things that you have to consider. So litigation is the actual process of suing someone, going through the court system. And it could be tedious, it could be long, it could be expensive, things like that, all the above. As a result, these alternative dispute resolution methods have been created, and they allow parties to resolve issues in a more, what they call, efficient manner. Now, there's a couple main ones. The first main one is arbitration. And arbitration, a lot of times, is written into contracts that says, hey, if we have a dispute, the first thing we're going to do before a lawsuit, or in lieu of a lawsuit, is that we're going to arbitrate. Now, what do you do to arbitrate? Well, choose an arbitrator, which may be chosen in the contract or otherwise. It's an independent third party who decides the case. Sounds a lot like a judge, right? But each party presents their case to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator most of the time makes a binding judgment, or comes to a binding resolution that binds both parties and says, okay, here's what's going to happen. A lot of times, the problem with arbitration is there's a couple problems. Sometimes the person that creates the contract puts in there, here's the arbitrator, here's who we use, and a lot of times that's the person that they use a lot. So that's not probably the situation you want to be in, because if they have some sort of relationship and that arbitrator relies on that financial income from that company, that may, I'm not saying it's going to skew things, but it may not be absolutely helpful to someone who's arbitrating that case. A lot of times arbitration is expensive too, so that kind of comes with the territory. It's less expensive than litigation, but it's still expensive as well. The other main type, and this is my own experience, it's been very, very successful helping clients, is mediation. And mediation is a voluntary alternative dispute resolution where both parties get together and they choose a third-party mediator. And that mediator doesn't make a decision, but the mediator helps to facilitate the settlement. So he'll listen to both sides, he'll talk to one side, talk to the other side, try to come to some sort of middle ground or some sort of common ground. And a lot of times the mediator that you choose has a huge effect on whether or not it's successful or not. So if it's a divorce case and both sides choose a retired judge who's done a lot of divorce cases, is very knowledgeable in divorce cases, listened to divorce cases for 25, 30 years, and that mediator comes in and says, look, I can't decide this case, but if I were on the bench and I was sitting here listening to it, here's what I would consider. Here's what I would look at. And a lot of times that has a large impact on the clients, on both parties. And it can kind of move things or facilitate things to the point where you can settle cases. There have been many times where I've gone into mediations going, God, these people hate each other's guts, not just from a divorce case, business, whatever it is. And we settle the case. We resolve the case because they're able to sit down, talk about the issues, even if it's not sometimes face-to-face. They see each other face-to-face initially, and maybe they go to different rooms, but they're in the same vicinity, and they're forced to some extent, even though voluntarily they can step up and leave, to address these issues. And a lot of times people feel like, you know what, I'm here. I have an opportunity to solve this case. I have an opportunity to cut off the spigot that is my, is my attorney's fees. That's just flowing money out of my company or out of my pocket. And this is a good opportunity for me to do that. So that's the base of alternative dispute resolution from that standpoint. And I want you guys to look at the rest of that, talking about the different types of courts, the different types of litigation. And of course, we have our state system and our federal system. And just in a nutshell, in Virginia, we have our general district courts, our circuit courts, which are our trial courts, Court of Appeals, and the Virginia State Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of Virginia. In the federal level, we have our United States District Courts, our Federal Court of Appeals, and then we also have the United States Supreme Courts as well. I shouldn't say Supreme Courts, the Supreme Court, there's only one. So that's the federal system. So just know that those different types are out there, and you can obviously read more about that in the text as well. I apologize, this video ran a little bit long. I'm going to try to keep future ones within 5-6 minutes. But there is a lot of good information here about the class and kind of overview as to what's going on. So I appreciate you watching this. I appreciate you getting excited about the class. Like I said, I love teaching for Stratford. I love teaching these classes, and I look forward to working with all of you. So talk to you soon, and have a great week. Take care.